Welcome to the Design Dash podcast, your guide to designing a life you love. Join us as we explore the keys to living the life you want without compromise. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Design Dash podcast, where we help you learn how to design a life that you love. We start every podcast by thanking our wonderful sponsors, and today it is Monogram. So Monogram is a longtime partner for us here at Laura Design Collective, the firm that Laura started and that I work with her on. And we love them because they believe in three main pillars that we as creatives can really easily get behind. That's materials, performance, and ownership. Each of these upholds their commitment to high quality and innovation and their ongoing relationships with designers and homeowners. We just absolutely love working with their team, and we believe that relationships and community are absolutely everything. The idea of ownership resonates with us too. And Design Dash, we're all about aspiration and action. This is the foundation that we're built on, and Monogram just lives that out day in and day out.
Yeah. And so today, speaking of aspiration and action, we have a wonderful guest today. It's Jacky Fischer. She is the CEO of Three Men Movers and the author of The Growth Paradox. Jacky grew up working in a multitude of crazy family businesses and is quite sure that her parents broke every child labor law. So if your parents didn't break child labor laws, what were they doing? But in 2003, she dropped out of art school, bought her parents' moving business, and grew it from 3 million to over 40 million in annual revenue. She received her MBA from Rice University, was named one of Houston's most admired CEOs by Houston Business Journal. Jacky is an expert on what it takes to build a multi-million-dollar brand. She's also a client of Laura Design Collective. We've been working together for 10 plus years. And in that time, we've designed homes in Galveston and Aspen, several in Houston, I don't even know how many, and consulted on one in the Bahamas. So Jacky likes to bounce around. And most recently, she has launched her first book, The Growth Paradox, Rethinking Control, Accountability, and Change to Move Your Business to the Next Level. So this is a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. And just from this blurb, this knowledge alone, it sounds like you have really designed a life you love. So have you really thought about your life as something that you intentionally design? Like, we design houses together, but have you thought about your life as something that you've designed?
You know, that's funny because I've never been asked that question before. So absolutely, I've designed my life, and I think a lot about it. And I think about what makes me happy and what makes me not happy, and what like the best day of my life could be, like the perfect day, what that is for me. And I work backwards from that and try to get myself there. So yeah, I do design the life I want to live.
And do you feel like your business, because you're very business oriented, do you feel like that you've designed your life with your business in tandem, or is your life been designed in spite of your business? I guess that's my question. Like, how has owning your business really impacted your life overall?
So it's interesting because there's, when you own your own business, the line between your business and your personal life gets very blurred. Like, for the longest time, I didn't even have a personal email address. Like, everybody just emailed me at my work address. And that, for some people, that can be difficult, but it's only difficult if you don't like what you do. I know for my family members, when I go home and see my mom and I'm with all my siblings, I'll pop open the computer first thing, and I kind of work on emails and things like that first thing in the morning. And they give me such grief about it. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you working? You're a workaholic. But I feel like you're only a workaholic if you don't like the work that you do. And then it's, it has that negative connotation, like being an alcoholic. But for me, I could sit around and play Sudoku, or I could, read a book. And I do like reading. But what I like to do is I like strategizing, and I like doing the work I do in my company. And luckily, I'm in a position where I don't have to do as many of the things I don't want to do. And then also, I raised kids running this business. And the cool thing is I could drop them off at school, go to work. And then by the time I was finished with work, I'd pick them up. And even though people say, well, you're a working mother and you own your own company, I bet your kids have suffered a lot from that. But actually, when they were at school, I was working. When I got home, when they got home, I was at home with them. So I don't really think that it really affected them as much as people probably think it did.
That's a really good example of what gets talked about a lot. And it's a buzz phrase, like work-life balance. Melissa and I talk a lot about work-life rhythm because it can never be a 50-50 balance, I don't think. Like sometimes your business takes precedence, sometimes your travel or your love life is at the forefront, and then sometimes your family, your kids are at the forefront. Do you think that's accurate? Is it more of a rhythm than a balance for you? Is that just semantics?
I also think that work-life balance, to me, it's almost like a little bit of a trigger because I've been on a lot of podcasts, and this is something that they don't ask men. They ask women because there's the thought process is that it's difficult to have both. And when your family life calls on you, your work life has to suffer, or vice versa. And I don't think we ask that of our executive men. And that's because I think even though we've fought for equality at the office, I think at home, women are still doing the lion's share of the work. You know, the house admin, filling out the permission slips and getting the uniforms cleaned and all of that kind of stuff. We still do a lot of that work. So I think balance, and I do agree, like certain times I need to be at work more than, and I have to prioritize work in certain periods of my life. And then certain times my kids need me, and they're grown up now, but when they were younger, they need me and I need to prioritize them. And so, I think with a lot of working mothers, there's kind of a time where you look at your whole life and you feel frustrated and you feel like I'm just mediocre at everything. I'm not excelling at anything. You have like these moments where you're like, I just can't be a good mother. I can't be good at my job. I can't do this. And you feel like it's just like this like mediocre performance all over the place because you're spread so thin. But, I think that's just part of it.
You just figure it out.
That resonates with me as a mother of a 2-year-old. I often feel like I'm not doing anything well at all. Let's go into your book right now, because that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book. And I'll be honest, I'm only halfway through it, but I love how in the beginning you talk so much, and you dedicated your book to both of your parents, and you talked about how they really supported each other. And I think one of the favorite parts that I have in this book is you talk about your checklist, your boundary checklist, and you have it where it's you and your spouse are making this decision to get together, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You're not doing it alone. And I think that what was really nice is that you come at it from the place of where your dad said, you can't talk about my success without talking about your mom. And I don't feel like you hear that enough from male executives. Maybe you do. I guess I'm just a female, so I'm not hearing that. But so I'm interested to see like what kind of boundaries you put in place. Like, where did that come from? Did that come from with, seeing your parents, or, did you sit down with your spouse and your children and you're just like, this is when I'm going to be at work and this is when I'm going to be present here?
I'm super fortunate because I'm married to an entrepreneur and he gets it. So if we're in the middle of dinner sometime and something goes down, like it's like really, really important, I go, hey, I got to step out. And he's like, okay, cool. And he doesn't get mad or frustrated. And the same goes when he has an issue. So I'm very lucky in that sense. But with my mother and father, my mother was not an entrepreneur. And he was so dedicated and passionate about this company. It was like another person in the relationship. And my mom was good with it. She was cool with it and she accepted it and she supported him. And you were talking about the part in the book where I gave a speech about how my dad founded the company, and it was kind of this rag to riches story. And afterwards I thought, nailed it. And I thought, what a great job I did. And then I went and sat down at the table thinking he was going to appreciate the speech. And he was really angry. And he said, don't ever mention my success without talking about your mother, because she was with me every step of the way. And my mom worked a full-time job. However, when she got home at night, she helped. And she supported him when he was feeling insecure about whether or not the business was going to succeed or not. And he really couldn't have done it without her. And I think sometimes spouses of entrepreneurs are unsung heroes because it takes a lot. It is a third person in your relationship.
Maybe that's why she just married an entrepreneur. I know, Laura, you're married to an entrepreneur as well, and so you understand that, but I'm not. And so my husband gets very frustrated when I have to pull away to take a phone call or get on email. So we have had to set a lot of boundaries for us both to be okay with what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Well, that's interesting that you've had that conversation, though. Like there's expectation setting around both of your expectations about your partnership, your marriage, and how that impacts your work, Melissa. And I think maybe it is sometimes easier if your partner is an entrepreneur because they get it. They already get it. And so I'm married to an entrepreneur. And sometimes even though I have my own businesses, I look at him and I'm like, what are you doing right now? It is Sunday at 7 p.m. Like, cut it off. Like, shut it down.
Okay. Although, Laura, I will have to say on our new project, you were texting me Sunday very late at night. So I got you.
I am so guilty. I know. And so I do it too. So it's like a double standard. But that leads me to this is a big part of what Melissa and I preach in our business and Laura U Design Collective, and that's empowering other people. We are huge on self-efficacy, on proactive problem solving, and ownership. That's our theme of this year is own it, like own your role. So, and I think Jacky, you talk about this too, like autonomy and ownership is really important. And empowering other people in your business has been huge for you. So aside from the satisfaction of like lifting someone else up, what benefits personally have you found come out of empowering others?
Well, what we were talking about before with work-life balance, you're not going to get it if you have a little company, that's one thing. But if you want to grow your company and scale your company, unless you have competent people that you've empowered to make decisions, you're never going to have that work-life balance. You're not going to be able to leave for 2 weeks without your phone blowing up. And it's hard to get that because what you think is you just say, okay, you guys are able to make those decisions. But what you have to do is be okay when they make mistakes. Because if you're not and you freak out every time they make a mistake, they're going to stop making decisions and they're going to call you for every single decision that they want to make and run it by you first. So you have to be okay if sometimes those decisions are different than what you would do. And then when people make decisions over and over again, that's what drives leadership skills. It's making good decisions. And so they have to have practice doing that.
And I guess, is that practice for you, essential theme of the business, of your book, The Growth Paradox, is letting go, like letting go. So letting them make mistakes. What does that mean to you? Like, how do you approach it when they do make a mistake or a decision that you wouldn't have made yourself? What do you do about that?
So first you have to get them good at making the decisions. And if you're not used to that, they're going to come into your office and say, hey, I was thinking about doing this. What do you think? And it's really easy to go, yeah, that's a great idea. Or no, don't do that. It could work out really bad. But I would encourage you, instead of answering yes or no, to push back and say, well, what do you think would happen? What do you think you should do? And what do you think would happen? And it's interesting. What I found is when you ask those questions, you turn from being like an answering booth to actually growing leaders. So, and if you're an answering booth, people will come to your office in this big long line, like next, and they all want their questions answered. And if you think about it, it's really great for employees that you answer the question, because if you answer the question, if it goes left, it's your fault. And there is really good stuff for the leader too, because if you're answering people's questions, you feel like the authority. It builds your ego. Everybody's coming to you and asking you things. Sometimes people need that feeling of being wanted and needed, and consulted over every single thing. So in both ways, it's good for the employees and it's good for the leader. However, long term, it's not good. So first, I would get them used to thinking out solutions on their own. And if they tell you what they're going to do and it's like something that you think is a really, really bad idea, refrain from saying that is the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. And just say something like, oh, that's interesting. Walk me through that and tell me about how that's going to work, and you kind of ask them a bunch of questions so they can work things out in their mind. And this is the funny thing. What I found out is sometimes I'm thinking that's a really dumb idea. And then when I say, walk me through that, they're privy to a lot more information on the front line than I am. And when they walk me through it and they tell me why, a lot of times I agree with them. I'm like, that makes sense. Yeah, go for it. I think that's a great idea, and then the times where I don't think it's a good idea, if they're very passionate about it and it's ethical and it's not going to like kill your bottom line, I let them go ahead and make that decision. Even though maybe I wouldn't do it exactly that way, because I want to empower them to make decisions on their own.
So very much is like a coaching mindset.
Absolutely.
Much more than like a dictatorial mindset.
Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah,
that's the work-life balance. If you're a dictator, soon as you leave, everything's going to fall apart. And there was a guy here who was the business mentor of my husband. And my husband used to say, oh, he was just this great business leader. He was amazing. And as soon as this man passed away, his huge multi-billion, I don't think it was billion, but $1 million business just completely cratered because he wasn't there. He ran the business with an iron fist and he wasn't there to tell everybody what to do. And people didn't know. He didn't raise a group of leaders that were good at making decisions, and it just collapsed. And my goal for myself and my company is to create a multi-generational company. In order to do that, if I, leave tomorrow and don't ever return, it's got to be able to go without me. And that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to take myself out of the equation of their success.
How do you help push them along? One of the lines that from your book that really resonated with me, because I'm such an overthinker, is you say, the more you know, the more fearful you become. And I feel like sometimes my quest for getting more data really holds me back. And then I can see that sometimes in our team as well, is that they're in this pursuit of getting more data. So then that can lead to inaction. And you talk a little bit about analysis paralysis. So how do you really push people to take that leap and even take a risk sometimes to do what they need to?
Well, I don't really like the words push people, because I don't really feel like that's a good visual. But when it comes to, yes, we have people on our team that get analysis paralysis. And a lot of times those people are from large corporations where they're used to having a ton of redundancy and they're used to mitigating risks. So basically, they don't want to do anything that could create failure or could highlight them in the pack. And it takes a lot of encouragement, because just for an example, our numbers have been pretty flat in the last year, about 2 years, because the interest rates went up. And so the housing market has been flat. So we've been really fighting hard for market share. And I've had some managers who were just like, they didn't want to kind of rock the boat. And I'm like, we need to fail. We need to do more stuff, and that could cause us to fail, but at least we're not going to be stagnant. We have to make big decisions right now. And I think that that fear of failure prevents you from success sometimes. And you have to be willing to take risks to be successful. Everybody knows what our vision is long term, and so they are allowed to choose the work that they want to work on to get us to that place. But I just think that sometimes we think failure is the opposite of success, when it's really just part of the process.
So you said something a second ago that oftentimes, or sometimes, the people that are afraid to take risks or risk failure come from larger corporations. Have you found in your business that someone from a larger corporation is likely just not going to work out for how nimble you want to be and risk-taking you want to be?
Sometimes, yes. I have two people on my team right now who are from huge companies, really big companies. And I was concerned with them. And those two, and I've had others that haven't worked out, but these two people were stifled working at large companies. They wanted a place at the table. They wanted to make a difference. And they're like, no matter what I do, this one guy came from a huge retail company. He's like, my portion of the business is X, and no matter what I do, maybe you can control like 2% of the revenue. And now he's running my whole marketing department. He can control everything, and he feels so much more empowered. And then we were talking about goals, and he's been trained to only set goals that he can slam dunk easily achieve. And I'm like, why don't we set a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal for this year? And he's like, he was kind of nervous about it. And I said, come on, let's do it. We can set our goal, but let's set a reach goal. And he said, yeah, but I'm from a corporation where if you do that, if you set a goal and you fail, there's big issues with that. And I'm like, yeah, but we're a mid-sized company. We encourage that. And he was so relieved and excited to be able to set these goals, and to aim really high and to try to do some things that are fun and unorthodox. So they're flourishing, but not everybody does. I've had managers that have come to the company and they just kind of don't want to change anything. And when you're a company my size or a creative company, we like to change things up a lot.
How much time do you give those people to adjust? Like, do you trust that you can train out the corporate?
It's funny. I was at a speaking engagement about 6 months ago, and this lady raised her hand and she said, I heard you speak 5 years ago, and I still remember what you said. And I was kind of flattered about that. And I said, what was it? And she said, hire slowly and fire fast. Do you still believe in that? And I said, absolutely. But I don't practice it. I think
I was going to say in practice.
In theory, it makes sense, but it's very hard because then, we're all human and we care about people, and we hope that things are going to work out for the best. We have that hope. But I think sometimes if you don't fire someone, and I wrote about that in the book, you're either delusional, chicken shit, or I can't remember the last thing I said, but basically, or lazy. That's what it was. Lazy, chicken shit, or delusional. And the reason I said that is because hiring somebody new takes a lot of work. You gotta get your feelers out. You gotta interview people. You got, make a decision. Then you gotta train them and like onboard them and all of that. It's a lot of work hiring somebody new, especially with a small company where you can't just ship that person over to training and how it's a very hands-on thing. And then chicken shit because you might not be happy with the person you have, but the person you hire could be so much worse, right? There's that fear of the unknown. Or delusional because you're like, well, this person hasn't worked out for 24 months, but maybe tomorrow they'll finally get it. So you're delusional. So you're either lazy, delusional, or chicken shit. And so sometimes you just got to let people go.
I'm going to bring this to our hiring and yeah, we're bringing this to all of our hiring and firing decisions. And Melissa and I make those decisions together with, our senior team. And so we've had these conversations.
It's not good for the person who's in the wrong company. And I'll give you an example. I had this guy working for me and he didn't work out, and he was just going too slow, and the pace wasn't there, and he was from corporate. And we let him go. He went to another company and he got promotion after promotion, and he really worked his way up the ladder in a different company. It doesn't mean that he was a bad guy. He just wasn't a good fit for my company. And I think everyone deserves, at the end of the day, to feel successful at their job. And if they're not successful, if an employee's not successful, they feel it. They know their team's disappointed in them. They know their boss is, and you're gonna drag that on for a couple of years, and every day they're gonna go to work and go home kind of feeling like they just kind of didn't do a very good job. They deserve to feel successful too. And sometimes they deserve to feel successful at another company. You have to kind of help them along their way.
Agreed. I know. And we struggle with this. We know all that. And it's great to hear it from your perspective too, because it is, you're offering some different things that we can consider. But once it comes down to that decision, it's hard. It's hard.
Unless you're a psychopath, it's really hard. I mean, firing somebody is just horrible. It's a horrible thing to do, and it just makes you feel so bad. You feel like a failure for picking the wrong person, or for maybe somehow things got off track along the way. And like, how did it get off track? Was it something I did? I mean, it's a really bad deal. It's the worst thing as a business owner that you have to do.
I think on the flip side too, there's the people that come to work for you and then they realize along the way they're not feeling it. Or like over COVID, we were so insanely busy that people are burning out. We're just trying to keep up. And so there's that idea of burnout, which people talk about a lot. So how do you address burnout personally for yourself, but also with your firm?
I have to be really careful with that because one of my first business mentors told me that the most important thing to do as a business leader is know yourself. And I did some of these like DISC type tests and found out that the way I rev is like in the top like 10%, and 10% not meaning good or bad, just some people are more paced and some people are more like frantically working and multitasking. And I'm kind of actually, if you think about it this way, the bell curve, the middle of the bell curve is what the average person is. And if you're outside either way, then you're deviating from the average person. Well, I'm way into, I want change. I want to go really fast. And so when I first started, before I knew that about myself, I'd look around and I was like, what is wrong with all these people? Why are they working so slow? And they weren't working slow. I was just like kind of neurotic. And I had to realize that this pace was not the pace for everybody else in my company. I need to like slow it down a lot. And so empowering
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
That's hard to accept.
I don't like hurting people. And I was hurting people. And
yep.
And so for me, making change because you don't want to hurt somebody, that's kind of easier to make. If you know that you're actually making people feel bad and hurting people. So it wasn't as hard as you would think it would be. But I mean, it's hard to change your habits and your innate personality. So what I like to do is encourage my employees to push back. And they really trust you when you say, hey, can you have this done next week? And they go, no, I can't. And to me, that maybe that would upset some people, but for me, that shows that they really trust me. They don't feel like they need to kiss up and just say yes and then work all night or whatever. But when you have healthy conversations with them and they understand their schedule and what's expected of them and what's on their plate, and they actually push back and say, hey, this isn't feasible. And, I have to respect that. And so a lot of times, because to me, if I say I want something done, to other people, they're like, oh, that probably means in a week or two. And for me, I'm like, in the next hour, right? That's the way my brain works. So I really have to let them know, like, hey, this really isn't that important. So because I can be pushy and I have to really, really take ownership of that and like curb my natural instincts.
I think a lot of that probably resonates with Melissa because she has to put up with me.
I'm the slower paced person. Yes, very much so.
But there's
not slower paced, just data driven.
Well, and usually data driven is slower paced because you want to look at the data to make sure it's right. And what I found is when you know yourself, what you should do is put people on your team that complement you. And so you guys complement each other. You know, Laura's going, hey, I got an idea. Let's do this. And then Melissa's going, well, let's dig into this further. And even if you continue to do it, Laura, you're still going to look at the information she presents to you, and it's going to make your plan even better. And maybe she might even talk you out of some things. But if you go through with it, having a team that will push back on you and call you on your shit will make all your ideas even better, because they're like, well, what about this? What about that? And you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And, it just makes your ideas so much better.
Oh, that's so true. Because sometimes I'll present an idea to my teams and they'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. And then I'll think the next day and think, that was the dumbest thing. Why didn't anybody tell me that was stupid? Like, we need to do something else.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, what really makes me crazy is, like, a couple weeks later, if you're talking about something and you're like, yeah, we made this big decision, and somebody says, yeah, I was thinking about it could go left because of that. And I'm thinking, why didn't you feel empowered enough to say that at the meeting? What did I do that made you feel like you couldn't come out and say that? You have to speak up. You have to talk to us about that, because we're going to lose time and resources if you're in the back of your head, you're like, hey, this is a red flag, and you're not saying something.
That's a really an amazing perspective to say, like, where was the trust that you couldn't have said that 2 weeks ago? And putting that really on yourself as the leader of the business, instead of saying, like, what's wrong with you? How in the world did you not bring that up? Like, you're failing on your own. Like, you're putting that really back on yourself. Like, what did I do that they didn't feel like they could bring that forward? I need to marinate on that a little bit. That's really interesting.
Well,
so
I had a guy that came to me once, and he was like really mad about the sales team. He was like, this, I know my employees are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, oh, is this us? No, this was like 15 years ago. Don't worry, guys. It wasn't you guys. But anyway, he was mad, and he came into my office and he was like, they don't care and this and that. And so just pushing his buttons and probably being very young, I said, well, just fire them all. Is that what you want to do? Because I was kind of tired of him coming and venting to me. And he goes, no, that's not what I want to do. And I said, look, if you have anyone on your team that is not performing, they're not the idiot. You're the idiot. Because think about it. They show up to work every day and they get a paycheck. So, and I hear sometimes these executives go, oh my God, my employees, they're idiots. And I get like this visceral response to it. Like, well, first I think it's just hateful and I don't like that. But also I think if your employees are showing up and they're not doing the job that you are paying them to do, and they're getting paid for it, it sounds like they're doing a pretty good job, right? They're still getting paid for it. And you're the person who's allowing this to go on. So you either need to train them or talk to them or find somebody that can do the job. So I don't think it's the employees that are the idiots. I think it's the owners of the companies that allow this to happen. And I do believe in kind of like intense accountability at the CEO level.
I think you'll find fans of that here, especially Melissa. She brings that to our leadership team a lot. I don't know that we're as direct as saying, like, your team's not the idiot, like you're the idiot.
I don't know
but
if I
should be.
I don't know. That was really more so these executives at this group that I was in, because they would come in and say some pretty harsh things about their employees.
That's easy to do when your employee's not there in front of you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know we're going to be wrapping this up in the next few. So we have a couple questions and then some rapid fire, easy questions maybe. But here's a hard one for you. So is there one big decision, like a monumental decision, when you were intentionally designing your life as you were going through your business and personal, is there one big decision that you can point to that feels like, yeah, that was the best thing I've ever done?
Oh, it's going to be corny if I tell you.
You have to tell us. We like corny.
Okay, it's corny, but I had gone through a divorce and it was really rough. And because I was so kind of beat up and emotionally hurt and raw afterwards, I made a vow that I would never, ever marry again. Because it wasn't that I was afraid of marriage, it was that I was afraid of going through a divorce. And so, and then I met this amazing guy, and he wanted to get married, and it took me 10 years to say yes. And so 10 years to the day we met, we got married. And because my work is so crazy, and I'm that type of person that bites off more than I can chew. It's part of my personality. When I get home and I have this very peaceful home life and a very loving, supportive husband, that really created a lot of value in my life. And so I think choosing him for a mate, I think sometimes we underestimate who we choose for a mate. And it's so important. Like, we have classes on everything. We should teach kids like how to choose your life mate, because if you don't have a good life mate, I mean, life is pretty crappy. So I think that would be the big decision, is saying yes. And I should have did it many years earlier.
Oh. And that's not corny. That's just amazing. I love that. You're such a romantic.
Yeah, he's great.
So we have a few rapid fire questions, and Melissa, you may want to like pack some in here that are different, but do you want to jump on these?
Well, we have the first one. And so question is, digital watch, analog watch, or no watch at all, and why?
No watch at all. I have my cell phone. Does that count?
No, that doesn't go on your wrist.
No, I don't have a watch. I mean, I have like a fancy watch, like in my safe, or, at the safety deposit, because we were doing construction on the house, and there were so many people that put it in the the thing at Amity Bank, the safety deposit box. But I haven't even gotten it out. It's been a couple of years. Yeah, no watch at all.
So is that a comfort decision? Is that an aesthetic? Okay, so it's just a practical decision. You already have a cell phone.
Because it's too big of a pain in the ass to charge it. I had one and I kept having to take it off and charge it. And I was like, oh, this is so annoying. I just can't be bothered. Yeah.
Yeah. Too much responsibility.
I'm very impatient.
I think. Okay, I think the next one's going to be kind of a tough one for you. This is going to be tough. So, best travel destination for finding inspiration: city, country, beach, mountain, any place specific.
Beach, definitely the beach. Oh, absolutely. Because when you see the water going back and forth, and those waves have been crashing in since before you arrived and will continue crashing in till long after you exist, it makes you understand that we're so small and insignificant. And so this moment that we have on Earth, we really need to design the life we want to live very carefully, because it's going to be over quick. And so it just makes me feel part of this big thing. It's being on the beach just feels great.
And I may have an inkling after reading the book where you may go with this, but outside of making your own best decisions, who is or was the biggest influence on how you've designed your life?
Absolutely my dad. For better or for worse, it was my dad. Now, my mom, as I've gotten older, she's had more of an influence on my life as I've gotten older. But as a child, he really taught me how to finish things, how to be aggressive and assertive and go after the things you want. As a child, I was very timid. I cried a lot. I whined around a lot. I was scared of everything, of bugs and of this and that. And he was always trying to kind of toughen me up, because he knew life was going to come at me really hard. And when I was younger, I didn't really appreciate that. I lost my dad in 2016. And so I can still kind of hear him in the background saying, suck it up. Come on, you can do this. And so, yeah, it would have to be my father.
Yeah, I love that line in there. I think I may have to use it with my daughter of, stop putting that stuff on your face. Why don't you go read a book and put something in your head? Like, maybe that's a good thing to say.
When I would put makeup on in front of the mirror when I was a teenager, he's like, what the hell are you doing? Quit putting that shit on your face. Go read a book. Go stick something in your head. And it's like, yell at me. But another thing
hey, that's good advice.
Yeah. He was like, what? These physical appearance is so insignificant compared to what's in your heart. And he was like, and what's in your head? And he was trying to encourage me to be more than like a 13-year-old putting on lipstick and primping myself in front of the mirror. He also, when I was 16, I just got my license and I could only drive the family car, which was like a Mazda 626, which I don't even know if they make those anymore, but it was a very small car. And he was like, handed me the keys to this big moving truck. And he was like, hey, I want you to drive this down Clay Road, which was like this 2-lane road with this huge ditch on both sides. And he's like, I want you to take it over to the repair shop for me and drop it off. And I was like, I can't do that. I mean, I was terrified. He said, I didn't ask you to push the truck. I asked you to drive the truck. You can do anything a guy can do, except maybe if it requires physical strength. So get in that truck and get going. And so, I drove it. I mean, can you imagine doing that? Like giving your 16-year-olds the keys to a big truck?
Especially here in Houston? No, I don't think so.
I think my dad would have gotten along with your dad, actually.
Yeah. And that's probably why we are the way we are.
Yeah. So, I thank you so. That's a great story. I love it. And for more of it, The Growth Paradox, Jacky Fischer. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing how you've designed your life. And can't wait to hear all about Jacky 2.0, because I know there's so much more to come.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here and to talk with you, ladies.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacky.
Thanks, Jacky. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out our next podcast, coming live next week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, you can find us and more wonderful stories like these on designdash.com. And make sure to follow us at Design Dasher on Instagram and TikTok. Till next time.